Hunky Parker is Watching You by Gillian Cross. Read by Judy Bennett. Chapter 1. Ingrid is back.
Dinah!
Lloyd raced up the stairs and hammered on her bedroom door.
Are you in there? Ingrid's back!
There was no answer. He thumped the door again.
Ingrid's back! We're going to have a welcome home party in the SPLAT shed. Now! Are you coming?
Still no answer.
Purple pickled onions!
Impatiently, Lloyd pushed the door open and burst into the room. Dinah was curled up on her bed, reading. Lloyd marched across and glanced at the book.
What have you got there? Further Advanced Mathematics? Yuck! Why do you always read such weird things?
Dinah looked up and blinked. Oh, it's you! What's up?
I'm not telling you again, Lloyd said crossly. Stay there and read your boring old book if you want to. Harvey and I are off to the SPLAT shed.
Hang on a minute and I'll come too. Dinah slipped the book into her pocket and stood up. Why are you in such a rush? Is something special happening? Lloyd spluttered and rolled his eyes up to the ceiling.
You'll have to wait and see.
Then Harvey rattled up the stairs, puffing and panting.
Aren't you two ready yet? Ingrid'll be there first if we don't hurry.
Ingrid? Dinah beamed. Is she back? I thought she was still in Wales. Lloyd gritted his teeth.
Listen, Dinah. Ingrid is back. Got that? The spots have gone and she's better and she's come home. And we're going to do a grand welcome in the SPLAT shed if we get there in time.
Why didn't you say so? Dinah leapt down the stairs, grabbed her coat and raced through the front door. Lloyd pulled a face.
Just think. We asked Mum and Dad to adopt her. We must have been mad. Life was much simpler before she came. When the headmaster was here,
Harvey gaped.
You liked it when everyone else was hypnotised? Of course not, said Lloyd. I just meant...
But Harvey had stopped listening. He was marching down the stairs like a robot, chanting in a mechanical voice.
You will do what I say. The headmaster is a marvellous man, and this is the best school I've ever been to.
He ran off after Dinah, and Lloyd followed, shaking his head. Everyone in SPLAT was getting impossible. It had been dreadful when the headmaster was there, but at least they'd had something to struggle against. When there were only 5 of them who couldn't be hypnotised. But now... Lloyd trudged down an alley and through the gate at the bottom. By the time he reached the SPLAT shed, Dinah and Harvey were already there, knocking on the door. Mandy's voice came from inside.
The man who can keep order can rule the world.
Lloyd finished the password.
But the man who can bear disorder is truly free.
Then he pushed open the door. Mandy was spreading a cloth over the box they used for a table, and she looked up and smiled.
Did you get my message? You know Ingrid's back.
Oh, yes, said Lloyd. We all know. Even Dinah.
He pulled a face at her.
What about Ian?
He's gone to get some lemonade,
Mandy said.
There's lots of money in the SPLAT savings, and I thought... Oh, here he is.
Ian lounged in, not bothering with the password, and put 3 bottles of lemonade on the table. He grinned at Lloyd.
Have you heard? Ingrid's back. Shimmering scarlet sausages.
Lloyd thought he was going to explode.
Of course I've heard. But why are we all talking about it? We've got to get this welcome organised or she'll be here. What are we going to do?
I've made a cake,
Mandy said. She lifted it out of her bag and put it on the table. It was a big cake with white icing and pink letters all over it. The big ones across the top said, "Welcome home, Ingrid," and the little ones round the sides spelt out SPLAT's full name. Society for the Protection of Our Lives Against Them.
I thought we could sing a song before we cut it,
Mandy said.
Really?
Ian raised his eyebrows.
How about Happy Birthday? Ha ha,
said Lloyd. But Harvey was bounding up and down.
That'll do, it will. We can change the words to Welcome Back Home to You. Like this. Welcome back home to you. Welcome back home to you. Welcome back home, dear Ingrid.
Lloyd put his hands over his ears.
We'll have to practice.
But they'd run out of time. The gate creaked, and there was a knock on the shed door.
Hello,
said a voice from outside.
Anyone there?
Lloyd put his finger to his lips and lifted his hand.
We'll sing what Harvey said, he hissed. Start when I drop my hand.
He raised his voice and called out the first half of the password.
The man who can keep order can rule the world.
Oh, you don't need to bother with that,
Ingrid said impatiently.
It's only me.
She pushed at the door.
Get ready,
whispered Lloyd, still with his hand in the air. The door swung open, and Ingrid bounced into the shed. Spreading her arms wide, she grinned at them and whirled round.
I'm back!
Lloyd brought his hand down. But no one sang a word. They were too startled. All of them were staring in amazement at what Ingrid was wearing. Ian was the first to get his breath back.
That's a pretty nasty T-shirt,
he drawled. Ingrid beamed.
Isn't it disgusting?
She whirled round again, more slowly this time, making sure they didn't miss anything. On the front of the T-shirt was a close-up of a pig's face with a disgusting slobbery snout. The face was grinning triumphantly, and large black letters were printed underneath it. Who's always right? On the back was another version of the same face. This time there was pig swill dribbling from its mouth, and the words underneath were different. I'm an educated pig. Harvey shuddered.
How can you bear to wear it?
I was afraid you'd all have them too, Ingrid said happily, but I can see I'm the first. Who's always right?
She whirled again, and then slowed down as she took in their expressions.
You mean it, don't you?
She said in an astonished voice.
You really don't like it.
I'm sorry, Mandy said apologetically.
But it makes me feel sick. I don't think I can eat any cake if I have to look at it. I've never seen anything like it.
Ingrid's mouth dropped open.
You mean they're not all over the shops? But you can't buy anything else in Wales. Everything's Hunky Parker there.
Ian raised his eyebrows.
Everything's what?
Hunky Parker. Oh, come on. You must have heard of Hunky Parker. He's been on television for 4 weeks.
Not here he hasn't,
said Lloyd. Ingrid stared at him. Then she glanced at the others. All their faces were blank, and for a second she looked taken aback. Then she grinned.
Well, he soon will be. He's just brilliant. If you come back to my house after the cake, I'll show you my video.
I don't think... Mandy began, but Lloyd didn't let her finish. He hated the T-shirt too, but he liked to know what was going on.
We'll all come, he said firmly. After the lemonade and the cake. We'll watch the video together.
SPLAT meets Hunky Parker.
Ingrid giggled.
You wait. You'll just love it. I know you will. I'm an educated pig.
She grabbed the cake and cut it into 6 big slices. Then she sat back and bit into one of them. It was 6 o'clock before they got to Ingrid's. Dinah tried to slip off home, but Lloyd wouldn't let her.
This is a SPLAT meeting, and that means we stick together. You've got to come.
Dinah didn't look pleased, but she went to Ingrid's and sat down in the front room with the rest of them.
It's not a very long video,
Ingrid said as she pulled out the cassette.
only a quarter of an hour, but it's fantastic. This was the first Hunky Parker programme Auntie Rachel let me watch, and I was still quite ill then. But the moment I saw it, I was hooked.
She switched the video on and sat back with a pleased expression on her face. Almost immediately, the screen was filled by a huge, slobbery pig's face, exactly the same as the one on the front of her T-shirt. It cocked its head and spoke smugly.
Who's always right?
100 voices roared the answer as the words splashed across the screen.
Hunky Parker!
The pig blew a raspberry, drooling bubbles from its snout. Then it waddled away from the camera into a neat, clean kitchen where the table was laid for breakfast.
I just love eating with the family, it said. I'm an educated pig.
Seizing a packet of cornflakes, it began to tip them into its mouth, showering crumbs all over the table. Lloyd stared. Ingrid thought this was brilliant. Had she gone mad? He didn't know if he could sit through a quarter of an hour of it. He looked round at the others. Dinah had already given up. She'd slipped the maths book out of her pocket and was reading that, totally ignoring the video. Lloyd shook his head. He ought to make her watch. But how could he, when the video was such rubbish? Glancing back at the screen, he saw Hunky Parker pick up a tin of golden syrup and empty it onto the table, on top of the sugar and toast and cornflakes he'd already spilt. Boring, Lloyd thought. And then something very odd happened. While Hunky Parker was spilling the golden syrup, he just looked horrible, fat and smug and grubby. But as he threw the tin onto the floor, something changed. Not Hunky Parker himself. He was just as fat and smug and grubby as before. The change was in Lloyd's mind. Suddenly, that fatness and smugness and grubbiness wasn't horrible anymore. Hunky Parker looked at the camera, grinned a dribbling grin and said,
Who's always right?
And Lloyd found himself laughing. He would have felt silly, but Mandy and Ian and Harvey were laughing too, and Ingrid was clutching her sides and rolling around on the couch. Only Dinah was quiet, buried in her book. How could she, when Hunky Parker was so... When the video finished, Lloyd was still hunting for the right word. Funny? Smart? Clever? Those were all wrong. He couldn't think of any way of describing how he felt about Hunky Parker. He was just it. The thing there had to be more of. Looking at Ingrid, Lloyd began to wonder where he could buy a T-shirt like hers. He was going to ask, but Mandy got in first.
You know your Auntie Rachel, Ingrid, in Wales?
Ingrid nodded.
If I sent her some money, do you think she'd buy me a Hunky Parker T-shirt?
And me,
said Harvey.
I fancy one too, murmured Ian.
So do I, Lloyd was going to say, when he had a much better idea. A fantastic idea. He beamed at Ingrid and waved a hand towards her T-shirt.
We'll all have one. They can be SPLAT uniform.
Ingrid clapped her hands and Harvey bounced up and down with delight.
That's brilliant! Fantastic!
Lloyd grinned triumphantly. He didn't notice that Dinah was still deep in her maths book. She hadn't heard a word. Chapter 2. Hunky Mania. A fortnight later, Dinah was sitting at breakfast with Lloyd and Harvey, quietly writing a computer program while she ate her porridge. Suddenly there was a knock on the back door, and Ingrid burst in.
They've come. The postman's just brought them. I couldn't wait until 9 o'clock to show you.
The T-shirts?
Lloyd grabbed the bundle.
It's wonderful timing, Ingrid said, because, guess what? Hunky Parker's going to be on television here, starting tomorrow.
Brilliant!
Lloyd had already pulled on a T-shirt. He held out 2 more to Harvey and Dinah.
Come on, let's see what we all look like together.
Harvey grabbed his, but Dinah was still thinking about computers, and she looked up, blinking. What is it?
Your T-shirt!
Lloyd shook it impatiently.
We've bought them with the SPLAT savings to be our uniform.
Dinah stared at the T-shirt. Hunky Parker's slimy snout was just under Lloyd's fingers. I don't want one.
Chocolate-coloured cabbages!
Lloyd slammed the T-shirt down on the table.
If you'd only listen! You've got to have one,
Harvey said, tugging his on.
Otherwise we won't all be the same.
But Dinah looked at the fat, dirty pig's face on Harvey's chest. She wanted to be like the others. They were SPLAT, and they always stuck together. But do I have to?
Yes, you do,
Lloyd said. Their mother came in, and he whirled round.
Look, Mum, isn't this fantastic?
Mrs. Hunter's mouth dropped open. Where on earth did you get those?
From my auntie in Wales,
Ingrid said proudly.
And they've come just in time because
Hunky Parker's on television tomorrow,
interrupted Harvey.
We'll be the only people with T-shirts.
Lloyd's eyes lit up.
Let's wear them to school on Friday. All the others will be sick they haven't got them.
Wear them to school? Mrs. Hunter looked horrified. We're supposed to wear uniform, muttered Dinah. Lloyd pulled a rude face.
You sound just like the old headmaster. All pupils here shall wear correct green uniform.
Dinah glared, but Harvey and Ingrid were giggling and joining in.
Everything must be neat and tidy, then we shall take over the world.
Mrs. Hunter frowned. It's no good playing games. I'm not letting you out of the house in those T-shirts. Thank goodness, thought Dinah. She screwed hers into a little tight ball and pushed it into the pocket of her trousers. But that was on Wednesday. On Thursday evening, things changed completely, because Hunky Parker was on television. When Dinah came downstairs after the programme, Mrs. Hunter was chuckling. That pig's quite something, isn't he? I can't think why you didn't come and watch, Dinah. Lloyd's eyes gleamed.
So what about our T-shirts?
Mrs. Hunter hesitated for a moment, and then laughed. All right, you can wear them tomorrow if you like. But, Dinah gulped, what about school uniform? It won't matter for once, said Mrs. Hunter airily. She lifted up a clenched fist, grinning. Hunky Parker, all right? Dinah folded her hands and looked down at the tablecloth. But no one noticed. Lloyd was busy planning their grand entrance into school the next morning.
We march into the playground and stand in a line, OK? Then I shout, Hunky Parker, and we open our jackets.
And show the T-shirts. Dinah could just imagine it. 6 horrible pig faces slobbering in a row. Everyone would make sick noises, and she would have to stand there pretending she liked Hunky Parker. She shuddered and pushed her plate away. It was going to be a nightmare. But she was wrong. Completely wrong. The next morning, the 6 of them marched into the playground just as Lloyd had planned, flung open their jackets, and got mobbed. The moment they showed the T-shirts, everyone charged straight at them, yelling, You lucky! Where did you get
shoes! Hunky Parker, yeah!
Lloyd beamed. He slipped his jacket off to show the rest of the T-shirt and bellowed above all the noise.
They're very hard to get, but I know where!
He was an instant hero. Dinah could have sold her T-shirt 10 times over that day, but she knew Lloyd would never forgive her if she did. Miserably, she went on wearing it, longing for the end of school so that she could forget all about Hunky Parker. But when they walked out of the playground at home time, things got even worse.
Look!
Screeched Ingrid. She pointed across the road at the sweet shop.
They've got Hunky too!
The shabby little shop window was full of crisp packets and chocolate bars, with 2 banners draped across the top. Pig out on a Hunky bar. Hunky chunks are swilliant. The shop doorway was crowded with children fighting to get in, and other children coming out with their hands full of crisps and chocolate. Harvey beamed.
Oh, yes!
He and Ingrid charged across the road, right in front of a lorry, and Dinah gasped.
Stop them, someone! Lloyd!
But Lloyd was following.
I'm getting across there before they scoff the lot. Those bars look brilliant. Swilliant, you mean? Murmured Ian. Let's go.
Even Mandy drifted over. In a few seconds, Dinah was standing alone on the pavement, staring at the struggling crowd in the shop doorway. It's only a craze, she thought. It'll go away. When Lloyd and Harvey came back across the road, they were sucking Hunky bars and holding a packet of Hunky chunks in their other hand.
Want one?
Harvey held out his packet and chanted,
Tasty Hunky chunks, the educated snack, swirl flavour.
Dinah shuddered. Yuck. No thanks.
Please yourself.
Harvey took a bite of the chocolate bar and pushed a Hunky chunk into his mouth as well.
There aren't enough to go round anyway. The shop was just about running out when we got there. I was really worried I might not get any.
It's only a craze, Dinah thought again. But there was an unhappy, niggling feeling at the back of her mind. Within a week, Hunky Parker was everywhere. All the children at school seemed to have Hunky socks and Hunky watches and Hunky pencil cases, and everything was swilliant or educated. The newspapers picked up the craze too. They homed in on the bizarre way the programs arrived at the television studio. Where does Hunky come from? Said huge front-page headlines on Thursday morning. Will he make it? Tonight, highly paid TV executives will be crossing their fingers and chewing their nails. At 6:30 sharp, 30 swillion viewers are expected to sit down to watch The Pig. And the programme won't reach the studio until an hour before. On the dot of 5:30, a mystery woman on a motorbike is supposed to roar into the television centre, bringing the precious Hunky Parker tape from a secret destination. But suppose she doesn't make it? Suppose something happens to her? But nothing did happen to her. The programme went out dead on 6:30, and Dinah felt like the only person in the country not watching. Next day, every shop on the way to school was flaunting something with the slobbering pig's face splashed across it. The baker's window was full of Hunky doughnuts, they're swilliant, and there was a huge, lurid poster plastered over the front of the travel agency. Suss out the sty. Holiday at Hunky's place for sun and snow together. Harvey pressed his nose to the window and sighed.
Oh, if only we could. Do you think Mum and Dad would take us?
Never mind about that, Lloyd said impatiently. Look over there.
He pointed at the shoe shop next to the school. There was a great heap of trainers in the window, and a huge poster of Hunky Parker's filthy face. Harvey started to run towards them.
Come on!
He yelled over his shoulder.
These are really educated!
Lloyd raced after him, and Dinah trailed behind, wondering what could be so special about trainers. She soon found out. The Hunky trainers weren't like anything she'd ever seen before. The front split into 2 sections, like a pig's foot, and the toes were covered with brown stains and smears.
"Step out of your sty," said the poster. "Get into Hunky trotters."
Harvey gazed longingly at them.
Aren't they just it? I bet they'd cost a fortune. Do you think Mum would buy some for me if I promised to do all the washing up for a year?
"You've only just had new trainers," said Lloyd. "It's Dinah who needs some."
He looked enviously at her.
"Lucky beast."
Harvey sidled up to Dinah.
Your feet aren't much bigger than mine, Di. Get Mum to buy you some of those trotters, then I can borrow them.
Dinah looked at the trotters and shuddered.
They were deformed. How could anyone?
She was just opening her mouth to tell Harvey how much she hated them, when there was a yell from the school playground next door. It was followed by a shrill scream, and then a loud, steady chant. Stepping back from the shop window, Dinah caught the words.
"Hunky or nothing! Hunky or nothing!"
What on earth? Lloyd and Harvey heard it too. They dashed for the school gate, and Dinah followed, peering through the railings to see what was happening. There was a huge crowd of children in one corner, all of them festooned with hunky badges and scarves and bags. Through the crowd, Dinah glimpsed a small, terrified figure dressed in neat school uniform. He was cowering back against the school wall, holding up an arm to protect his face. The others pressed closer and closer, and the chant rose to a shout.
"Hunky or nothing! Hunky or nothing!"
Dinah raced into the playground and grabbed Alison Edwards, who was at the back of the crowd. "What's going on? Why is everyone picking on Benedict?"
Can't you see? Alison said, scowling. He hasn't got any hunky things. And he says he doesn't know about Hunky.
She wrenched her arm away from Dinah and turned back, taking up the chant again in a fierce, jeering voice.
Hunky or nothing!
Dinah's mouth fell open. She couldn't believe what was happening. For a second, she didn't know what to do. Then, to her horror, she heard 2 familiar voices shouting right next to her.
"Hunky or nothing!"
It was Lloyd and Harvey. They were both grinning and yelling loudly like everyone else, as if the whole thing were a great joke. Dinah grabbed their arms and shook them as hard as she could.
"Stop it!" she screamed. "Don't be so horrible! Stop it this minute!"
Chapter 3. Or Nothing. When Lloyd raced into the playground, he didn't know what was happening. He thought there must be a big fight going on or some kind of argument. Then he saw Benedict Watts, with the whole crowd round him. Benedict Watts, in his silly, childish, smug school uniform, with not so much as a Hunky Parker badge on it. Lloyd felt his face grow hot, and his heart began to thud in his chest. Angry thoughts buzzed round his mind, all by themselves, as though a small voice had whispered them into his ear. It's people like that who spoil all the fun. People who won't join in. People who try to be clever. Suddenly, words started bursting out of his mouth, and he found himself chanting with everyone else.
"Hunky or nothing!"
At exactly the same moment, Harvey started chanting too, and Lloyd grinned sideways at him. "We'll show them," he thought. "We'll show people they can't try and stop us liking Hunky." The 2 of them took a step forward and raised their voices, and Lloyd glared through the crowd at Benedict.
"Hunky or nothing!"
And then Dinah grabbed them. Lloyd hadn't given her a thought. He was totally caught up in the chant, and he wasn't looking at anything except the green of Benedict's school uniform. But suddenly there she was, with her fingers digging into his shoulder. She was nothing like as big as he was, but she shook him so hard that the words caught in his throat and he stopped yelling. At the same moment, Benedict's voice rose over the noise of the crowd in a shrill wail.
But I can't watch Hunky Barker. It's on when I have my cello lesson.
There was a loud, jeering roar from the crowd, but Lloyd and Harvey couldn't join in. Dinah shook them again and hissed furiously.
You see, they're all picking on him, and it's not his fault, is it?
Lloyd blinked and shook his head from side to side. Suddenly it felt muzzy. Dinah was glaring at them. Her face had gone white with shock.
What made you join in? You never bully people like that.
Lloyd was still struggling for words. He simply had no idea what had happened. Harvey blinked up at Dinah.
It was like being in the play or something. When I came in, I just knew what I had to do, as if I'd been told beforehand. For goodness sake!
Dinah almost exploded.
That's the most feeble excuse I ever heard.
But it was like that, Lloyd said slowly. I looked at Benedict, and it was just as if someone told me what to do.
Dinah obviously didn't believe him.
I didn't think you let other people tell you what to do. You're the person who's always giving orders.
Lloyd's head cleared. She was right. He shouldn't be letting himself be pushed around by whatever it was. He should be...
I'm going to stop this, he said firmly. I'm going to get Benedict out of there.
How?
Harvey turned back to the crowd, and his voice wobbled and died away. The chant was louder than ever, and Benedict was pressed right back against the drain pipe, so squashed that his school bag was being trodden underfoot. Even Dinah looked daunted.
What can we do? We can't fight off that many people.
We're not going to fight them,
Lloyd said. He raised his chin defiantly.
We're going to make them see reason. At least I am.
They won't listen to you,
wailed Harvey. Lloyd didn't take any notice. He began to push his way into the crowd, digging his elbows in and dragging people sideways so that he could wriggle through. 1 or 2 children pushed back, but most of them didn't take any notice. They were concentrating on Benedict. With a final ferocious shove, Lloyd reached the front. Benedict's eyes widened in horror, as though he expected some kind of trouble, and Lloyd leaned forward and hissed in his ear.
Don't worry, I'll get you out of this.
Then he turned to face the crowd, and his heart almost stopped beating. Scores of people were staring at him. Hundreds of angry, jeering eyes glared above fiercely chanting mouths. It was a dangerous, uncontrolled crowd. He took a deep breath and bellowed as loudly as he could.
Stop it! It's stupid! Leave him alone!
Not a single person listened to him, but their eyes grew angrier, and suddenly the chant began to change. It grew sharper and shorter, and the crowd pressed forward, stretching out hands to pluck at Benedict's clothes.
Nothing! Nothing! Nothing!
The words sliced through the air like an ugly steel blade, dangerous and threatening. Lloyd could feel the tension building up, and he knew he hadn't got much time left. He had to get them all to change their minds, or he would find himself in a hopelessly uneven fight, with him and Benedict on one side and the rest of the school on the other. He had to talk himself out of it. But how? Lloyd looked sideways at Benedict and almost despaired. He was so hunkyless. He hadn't got a single hunky thing anywhere on his clothes or in his bag. If only... That was it. Desperately, moving so fast that his hands stumbled and the pin pricked his fingers, Lloyd unpinned the bright new Hunky Parker badge he was wearing on his school coat. He had no time to explain what he was doing. He simply grabbed Benedict, pinned the badge onto the front of his green blazer, and spun him round to face the crowd. It worked, like magic. Almost immediately, the shouting voices died away, and people began to fall back, looking rather foolish. Lloyd grinned at them over Benedict's head.
Who's always right?
He yelled. That stopped them feeling stupid. The answer came back in a final, joyful bellow.
Hunky Parker!
Then they turned and began straggling away into school. Dinah and Harvey pushed their way towards Lloyd.
That was swilliant, El,
Harvey said.
You're a genius.
Lloyd tried to look modest.
Just lucky.
He glanced at Benedict.
You okay, Ben?
I...
Benedict was still shaking.
It wasn't my fault. I didn't mean to upset them. I didn't do anything. Thanks, Lloyd.
That's all right,
Lloyd said airily.
I think you'll be safe now. But you'd better go on wearing that Hunky Parker badge for the time being.
Benedict looked down at it and pulled a disgusted face.
Do I have to?
For a second, Lloyd heard the small voice whispering in his head again. It's people like that who spoil all the fun. He struggled to ignore it, but he could feel the smile disappearing from his face.
Why don't you watch the programme?
He said coldly.
Then you'd understand why we all like Hunky.
But it's the day I have my cello lesson.
Lloyd screwed up his fists.
OK, don't go on about it. Stick with your wretched cello lesson if you want to, but make sure you wear the badge and look as though you like it.
Yes, of course. Thanks a lot.
Picking up his dusty, battered school bag, Benedict scuttled into the building. Dinah grinned at Lloyd. Well done. But Harvey wasn't smiling. He looked down at his feet, scuffing them along the playground.
What's the matter, H?
Lloyd frowned at him.
Aren't you pleased I got Benedict out?
Yes, of course I am,
muttered Harvey.
So?
So?
Harvey hesitated.
It sounds silly.
Lloyd sighed. But Dinah was watching Harvey's face. We won't laugh, she said quietly.
Tell us what's the matter.
Harvey shuffled his feet again.
Well, you know when we first heard them shouting? When we were outside by the shoe shop?
Dinah nodded.
Well, just before I heard the words, I had a very strange feeling, as if...
Harvey glanced from Dinah to Lloyd and back again.
As if I knew what they were, without hearing them, and I had to join in.
Dinah looked puzzled. But you didn't have to. Nobody made you. Lloyd felt as though a cold finger had touched his chest.
I know what he means,
he said slowly.
Because I knew too. And it wasn't just then that I felt I had to shout. Just now, when Ben was saying he couldn't watch Hunky Parker, I felt really cross with him.
But that's ridiculous.
Dinah swallowed.
You know what Ben's like. He never watches anything on television. And why does it matter anyway?
Lloyd shook his head, trying to make sense of it all.
I don't know. I just feel as though everything has to be Hunky Parker.
Well, you won't get me watching it, Dinah said. I may wear the T-shirt, but I'm not going to waste my time on the programme.
Of course not,
Lloyd said quickly. But for one sickening moment, he found himself thinking, Hunky or nothing. And when he looked across at Harvey, he saw that his fists were clenched. End of side 1.